Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yuli Rahmawati, the moderator for the Associate Professor of Rachel Sheffield. We would like to start the keynote speaker today. Before we start, I would like to let you know that the presentation will be going through for 45 minutes, and then we will have the question and answer throughout the 5 until 10 minutes. So just put your question on the chat box, and then Associate Professor Rachel Sheffield will answer the question. Before we start, I would like to introduce our speaker today. Associate Professor Rachel Sheffield is from the Curtin University, Australia, and she is the Associate Professor in School of Education at Curtin University. As her field as a science educator, she has been published several publications in STEM education, and then especially in STEM identity, and then she has awarding several awards from the university and national award for teaching excellence, and then also the executive endeavor fellowship in 2016, and then the great achievement on the 2020 of the Women's Hall of Fame for her work in STEM and science education over the 35 years. So currently, she's working with the STEMinist research group that he also helping us in several countries in India, Indonesia, and Malaysia, and also supporting the women in STEM education. It was nominated for the 2019 Premier Science Awards and 2020 UNESCO Prize for Girls in Science for Impact on Women. So the title of Rachel's presentation is The STEMinist, the story of some women in STEM. So I would like to give this opportunity for Rachel to give the presentation. Please, Associate Professor Rachel Sheffield, for proceed the presentation.
Okay, so I can hear you without the headset, but you can't hear me. Welcome. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to the organizers of this amazing conference for the opportunity to talk to you. And thank you, Yuli. Yuli and I have worked before. She knows how to get me off when I can talk too long. And I have to apologize because Professor Tom had the most amazing slides in Bahasa Indonesian, and I apologize that my slides are in English. But I'm hoping that some of the pictures will make up for my lack of Indonesian. So thank you so very much. And as I said, thank you so much for the organizers of this conference for this opportunity. So I would like to talk to you about some of the work that we've been doing around women in STEM. I was going to talk a little bit about STEM, but I know Professor Nato and Professor Larry have done that so eloquently. I probably won't touch on that, but I will talk about women in STEM and look at some of the projects that we've been doing, including the STEMinist project. I didn't envisage myself as a woman in STEM until 2019, when I'm in this picture somewhere with, I went to Antarctica with a group of 100 STEM women from across the world. It was a remarkable experience because Antarctica is an amazing place, but it was a remarkable experience to spend that time with such a diverse group of women in STEM, and the conversations that we had around increasing the numbers of women in this area. I have to say there were a couple of Indonesian STEM STEM people in this group, STEM women, but not as many as probably we should have compared to the numbers. But the photos I've picked out to put behind the slides were taken by my very clever colleagues on this journey. I have to say I have no skills at all, but I thought this one was a beautiful one. So I wanted to talk about women in STEM, the numbers, why the numbers are as low as they are, what we can do. I have some research from a colleague in Indonesia, Ella Fratina, and she was looking at numbers of women in Indonesia in STEM areas, so I can talk a little bit to that from that information. But I wanted to talk to you about girls in education, because I think that precedes the notion of women in STEM. And I think from the most part, this study from the UN around 25 years of progress for girls is showing that girls are increasingly in school and are doing extremely well. So if there's a 1999 and 2018 in this graph, and you can see that the numbers are high. In Southeast Asia, it's probably the lowest, which is here, but it's such a big increase. I think we are on the right track to get all the girls into schools. And I think that is a really, really positive start, because if you want women in STEM, you first of all obviously going to need them in education. I looked again, boys and girls. Southeast Asia, unfortunately, or South Asia actually, East Asia and the Pacific do better. South Asia does particularly poorly in the number of students who are out of school. So this is where we don't want these numbers to be high. But again, they're coming down in this area, although not in Africa, but across the board in other areas. And we're looking at boys and girls. So getting them into education is such an important start to this. And then we look at girls' achievement, because I think there's a notion of how girls are able to achieve. So if you have a look at these two, I really like these because it shows the achievement of boys and girls. They actually said that in this data, from 2010 to 2017 across the world, so the different dots represent different countries, boys are slightly better at maths, but not as good at reading. So reading is on the left. Girls are at the bottom of the graph, boys are at the top. But in 2/3 of the country, girls performed similarly or better than boys in science. So, and the study there is quite big. So we're starting to have parity for girls and boys in studying at primary and secondary ages. So that's a good start for getting equal numbers of women in STEM. But what happens? Because it doesn't continue. We do see here the percentage of 15 to 19-year-old girls and boys not in employment. Across the world, it's lower. It's only 10% for boys. It's 24% for girls. So I think this is where there is a little bit of discrepancy or difference, which is going to change what's going to happen subsequently. North America, as you'd expect, it's the same. South Asia, again, there is this huge difference. Only 8% of boys are not in employment, education, or training. 33% of girls between 15 and 19 are not in any of those spaces. And in sub-Saharan Africa, again, it's the same as Latin America. So that is starting to provide us some explanation, but we continue and we look more specifically at STEM subjects. Now, I know everybody so far has made an incredibly strong case for the value of education and the value of STEM education. Whether you can consider it as the subjects, you consider that as values, and in the framework that Professor Larry was using, you are considering that it is important. We need it for solving real life problems, and we need it And so making sure that women and men are represented in this and that we have enough is going to be incredibly important. What we do find, though, is that we have a deficit of people to work in this space. We don't have enough in the trends for the world of people in STEM. We don't have enough in technology, very, very strongly in engineering. And so we have low numbers, we need more. And again, it's not equitable between the boys and the girls. So let's have a look at the numbers. And I have to say that these come mainly out of the US, the UK, and some of Australia. Because most of the research accessible to me is in that space, there seemed to be less information in other areas and other places in the world. So we have parity. In fact, we have overly large numbers of women who are doing bachelor's degree in any subject, but this drops down to 35% in this particular set of data. STEM workforce for women, we're down to 22%. And then when we go down to Nobel laureates in science, we're very, 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 very short, small number. So 74% of STEM workers in the US are male, 26% are females, and I should advocate that that is very similar to the numbers in the UK, in Australia, and also in the UK. So I don't know if you've probably heard the expression of a leaky pipeline. This again is out of the US, but I love the notion of the fact that we were getting leakage from STEM generally, but specifically from women who weren't going through. So we had, they took from year 9 or grade 9 into high school, and then it dribbles away until you get a very small number of STEM graduates. I did find some information from, this is from 2014, and it shows Indonesia. And I love this because for you as an Indonesian community, you are leading the way because you have the highest number of engineers out of all the countries that are listed here. So out of the US, with the US for women is only 19% of women in engineering are, 19% of the people in engineering are women, whereas in Indonesia, you have well over double that, and you have nearly 33%, which is awesome. Science and technology also high, not necessarily as high as India here or South Africa, but certainly better than these countries, US and Chile down here. So this is actually from the World Bank statistics. So girls and boys, they all completed high school, but they are graduating from university. High levels in blue, which is education, but much lower levels in the other, in STEM subjects. So I think this is a really interesting statistic. So what we have is low numbers of girls held back from participating in STEM education. So the next thing is, why is that happening? And we've considered a few things. We'll look at a bit about discrimination and biases, social norming, stereotyping, and expectations. And sometimes that's about the stakeholder expectations of family members and society. So what influences or what prevents women from entering into STEM? It's not about their biology. So STEM is not just a boy thing. And I've looked at STEM here with the medicine on it. As Professor Larry talked about, we had STEAM, we have STREAM, we have all sorts of areas. I'm going to use this definition because the data I pulled was mostly around this information. So women are underrepresented, but it's not due to they don't have capacity. I think that's really evident in Indonesia, where there are higher numbers of women studying engineering and also science and technology. There are lots of socio-cultural factors that will impact on this. And girls tend to think that they are not as good at maths as their boys in their classes. They are, but they don't think they are, which is really interesting. And then there's this gender difference in self-confidence. So we often have girls thinking that they are not as good as boys in this space. They are, and I can share with you all the data where I've pulled the data from as we get further through. I like this picture. This is a wandering albatross. We were down in the Antarctic Peninsula when this photo was taken. So in some fields, such as biology, they are equally represented in the undergraduate level and postgraduate, but they tend to still leave these careers. So we've got this notion of not as many in engineering, not as many in technology. They are the same numbers in biology, but they're not staying in there. So why is that happening and what's going on? Again, these are the penguins from the Antarctic Peninsula. I think this is a Gen 2 penguin. There are fewer women in STEM. The research says their jobs are less secure and they earn less. Again, as I said to you, this is very much focused into the US and Australia and the UK. 35% of all students are enrolled in STEM-related fields are female. 28% of the world's researchers are women. That's quite low comparatively. If you are a woman in the US of color, if you're African American, there's only 2.9% of women in STEM areas. If you're Latino, it's 3.6. And in the US, if you're an Asian woman, it's only 4.8. And only one company in 5 of the top 500 companies in the US have women on their boards. So that's a real concern that situation is occurring. What else did they find out? They found out that after women have completed a PhD, they earn about a third of less than their colleagues, their male colleagues. That's concerning. And although women fill out half the jobs in the US economy, they hold less than 25% of the STEM jobs. So in the US, it's particularly bad. It was fairly cold on the Antarctic Peninsula. These are 2 of my female colleagues. It also found out from the research that women who don't have children tend to earn more than women who do. So that's not incentive to go and have your own children, is it? And if you look at their differences and you control them, women still lag behind men by 11% in first-year earnings. It also says that women who have young children within the 5 years of earning their PhDs are less likely to hold tenured faculty positions. So that's also a case that is a disincentive for women to spend time in STEM. Some of this is about academia, but most of this is around STEM and STEM academia. This is a view from my porthole one morning. This is one of my photos. So women are more likely than men to prefer work with clear social purpose. And so possibly, and maybe inaccurately, people don't always view STEM occupations as directly benefiting society and individuals. Well, as we know, and we will contest, and it does say this is inaccurate, we have a very strong sense that STEM is extremely important and therefore, and often does have a very strong social purpose. So medicine, biomedical engineering, environmental engineering. So higher percentage of women in those areas, lower in things like mechanical or electrical engineering. But I think you'd probably be able to argue that we're actually still in that space needing women, and it's still very closely focused on social purposes, so positive social achievement. Attrition from the STEM workforce. So women go into STEM, they don't stay there very long. They often, especially for tenure, they often don't have tenure. They tend to be in lower roles. They don't get faculty positions. They earn 12% of doctorates in engineering, but only 7% of the tenured faculty was made up of those women. And that's in engineering, and that was in 2006. In areas like biology, women receive 42% there, but they are still quite low, and there are only 25% of them are tenured subsequently. So it says they have lower job satisfaction, higher turnover, and loss of talent. And I notice in our engineering faculty here at Curtin, we have had a decrease in the number of women who have been working in that space. So they said that between 2001 and 2014, 18 STEM disciplines were significantly underrepresented by women. So that is not just in PhDs, that's in associate professors and full professors. And doesn't matter who was in the pool, that men were twice as likely to win scholarly awards than women. And then this information was particular to the UK, sorry, the United Kingdom. They had more administrative duties on average than men, and therefore less time to do research. And when research is how you're judged, having less time to do research, you have to think about other ways of managing that to make sure that you are competitive. So there are interesting ways to do that. And I'm thinking about colleagues now, because I know that each of us colleagues have different ways of being able to manage that. So collaborations are really strong. Yuli, would you agree with me in that? The notion of being able to work alongside other people is helping. And I, as I said, work in teaching. I'm really good at that area. And so therefore I'm more likely to be in there because that will give me opportunities as well. So, but in terms of pure research, absolutely. This is a tale of a humpback whale. It was amazing to be on the deck of the boat to see this, and then not only to be able to see it, but to have my female colleagues be able to tell me what age whale it was and whether it was male or female, which was pretty spectacular. I know this sounds like a very gloomy trip. I hope the pictures are keeping you positive. Women often feel unsupported in their work environment. They have very difficult work schedules. They're often the primary carer, and that makes it really difficult. And I know Yuli's nodding about being the primary carer for children. And so we have to manage that. We have to put it off. We have to do workarounds. We have to get help to be able to do that. And so it becomes extra hassle, and so it makes it all the more challenging. And interesting here, it said that 33 or 34% of women between 25 and 35 were intending to leave their profession within 5 years. This is in STEM. So the answer to that would be why, and I expect that they are finding some of these issues up here around childcare. It says they're more likely to work part-time, and that's really true. They have lower salaries when they work part-time. They have no job security. In our university, the predominance of our sessional staff, who are amazing teachers, they are mostly women. Not always, but mostly women. They work extremely hard. It's a very insecure place to work, and therefore they never step up into the space to do research in the same way. And while research is incredibly strongly valued. I put this in to show you how it looked, and then I darkened it so that I could see what I was going to talk about. This is around bias. So the notion of people having a negative view, even though they don't necessarily say they do. So about gender stereotypes. A lot of the things that they say, and again, I pull this into the UK and the US and Australia, that women are much more likely to be thought about as less likable, especially if they're in a masculine job and are viewed to be doing masculine type things. So it's about likability. Men are more likable when they're in those tough jobs doing difficult things. Oh, there's the picture of it without the darken. This is an Adelie penguin. You know that because its fur comes right down on its beak, and it gets it's a much colder penguin. It lasts in much colder climates. So I'm just doing my penguin thing. Papers by women are much less likely to be cited than those by men. I think that's interesting. And scientific journals tend to appoint more men than women to editorial boards. That's interesting, isn't it? I'm not sure about the notion of citing. I don't tend to look for a journal when I'm citing if it's a male or a female, but that's an interesting notion. And again, the numbers indicate where this data has been taken from, and I'm happy to provide it. We also talk about sexism in spaces, and although we as women don't like to think about that, that happens for us. And they talked about women in STEM and found that 71% of women reported experiencing sexual or harassment of some sort, compared to 41% of men. One of my girlfriends, an engineer, used to go up to the mine sites. The mine sites were full of men, lots of things around calendars which were inappropriate and things like that that she had to deal with. So there are these things, and these are just what happens. This is not saying that every situation is like that. This is just talking generally about the barriers for women. So there is, again, the gender stereotyping. And women's feeling that their expertise is not is less likely to be acted upon because people don't feel that they are experienced or they have the knowledge. If you're looking at, they've done this, they've looked at, from Yale, they looked at 2 identical job applications, one with a male name, one with a female. They always chose the male name, even though the actual job applications were identical. Isn't that concerning? They offered the female lower salary, less mentorship, even though the applications were the same. So they wanted to test this as a bit of scientific evidence. And both male and female faculty were equally likely to exhibit bias, which is concerning, isn't it? So that's women as well, biased against women. This is, I love this picture because just moments before, this is a penguin's egg, and this bird has just stolen the penguin's egg and taken off with it from underneath the feet of the penguin in one of the visits that we did to the peninsula. So women earn 20% less in STEM careers than women in any kind of STEM area in the US. And that's huge still, that we get 20% less for the job that we do. And it doesn't matter what the level of achievement is. I thought that was really interesting because I thought, well, maybe when women get up to associate professors or professors, it would be better. It isn't, which is concerning. Now, this is where we've got some data. I'm really pleased. Ella found this for me. It's from UNESCO in 2016. And it's about girls enjoying subject areas. So in Indonesia, the most enjoyed subject is phys ed, art and music for both boys and girls. And the least enjoyed is maths for both groups and physics for both groups. That actually isn't around gender. I'm not sure that's gendered. I think that's just that we need to do more for physics. I think poro physics and mathematics there. But also in Cambodia, science was very low for females and males, and science was low for in Malaysia for both males and females. So maybe this is not about this is definitely maybe not about gender. This is about the subject itself, possibly. We need to have a look at what we can do to change that. This is the proportion in Indonesia. I think this is amazing. Look at these numbers. 88% of all the women or the people studying pharmacy are female, 80.7 biology, 73 medicine, 66.8 chemistry, 57.7 mathematics. Do you know, I think that's marvelous because your numbers are so much better than the US, the UK areas. And I really would be interested in finding out if you could suggest to me why you are doing so amazingly well. I'm hoping to answer that question. We looked at students' attitudes towards maths and science. Anxiety is, it's actually not that different in maths. I'm looking at motivation. We'll have to have a look at significant differences, but just looking at them, they're not. So perseverance, the females 49%, the males 46%. Confidence, females have slightly more confidence. So that's interesting. This is in a school, in a school setting. And in science, confidence, I'm just having a look. Malaysia is very different. Females quite low in confidence in science, higher in the boys, but anxiety again higher. Indonesia the same. Look at this. Very interesting data. So if we're looking at a total though of researchers in science, technology and innovation by gender, 31% female, 69% males. But if we looked at that first graph, it's not in medicine and it's not in pharmacy. So possibly it's in technology and possibly engineering. That would be really interesting to think about too. So I love this picture. It didn't get dark very often there in Antarctica, but this is one of those beautiful pictures taken. Effective things we can do to change stereotypes. Well, we have to create role models. And some of the conversations today have been amazing around what is being done in Indonesia and in Australia, Alaska, around the world in terms of providing those role models and showcasing career opportunities, engagements with universities and outreaches. So those are the sorts of things that we are already doing. Targeting recruitment strategies, looking at how we can retain in these areas. And I suppose having, being aware that it's a problem. So looking at how we can support that with flexible work options and leadership champions and so forth. A better understanding of performance relative to opportunity, assessment of impact of career opportunities, mitigation against unconscious bias, and managing pushback. So the notion that everybody needs to encourage women into those spaces and have champions, male and female champions of change. Just very briefly, I want to talk a bit about the STEMinist program, and you've heard a lot about the other programs. This is another program where we brought female pre-service teachers with female engineering students, which are very low numbers in Australia, and we worked with primary students. Now, the primary students, male and female, had no problems in that space. They were equally engaged and interested in the activities that we ran. It's interesting to think then where this starts to change and students start to become less interested in STEM ideas. Again, we were talking about the doing aspect of it, and so we've been doing lots of activities and a few boys slipping into our STEMinist communities as well. So we've been doing this for a few years now. I've been working with Yuli over in Indonesia. We've did some work in India, and we've been trying to encourage and promote hands-on learning and the notion of women and well, yeah, women as leaders in this role and as mentors in this space. So I think there is lots of innovation that's happening, lots of initiatives, and I think it's absolutely brilliant listening to some of the work that's being done, and looking forward to the conference and having a look through the brochure of all the sorts of things that are being done in and around Indonesia and across the world to encourage students into the space and to make it as interesting and engaging as possible. So we've been doing work in Makerspace, and at the moment we are putting a book together around some of the Makerspace work. Oh, here's the Indonesian Makerspace students down Bhopal. These are our very first STEMinists. And I was going to show you a little bit. I was going to show you a little bit about what I think is important, very, very briefly, around the notion of, I know Professor Larry was talking about what he valued. I do think content knowledge is important, absolutely. But for me, I think the focus should be on the skills. I think in the world where we Google everything, and we can find things out very, very quickly, then I think we need to focus on how we get students to do these very important skills: collaboration, communication, critical and creative thinking, and how do we measure them? Because for us as educators, that is the challenge. And I put these up because they sit across for us. These are the UNESCO ones, and they sit across the Australian general capabilities. And I think with the new program in Indonesia, these skills are becoming more important and more valued. And I'm going to just go back a little bit because I wanted to show you, when we work with the pre-service teachers, we do this sort of activity, and I get my pre-service teachers not just to look at what maths and science might be here, but I get them to think about what sorts of skills that students can demonstrate while they are doing this activity. My next step to this would be, how do we capture that, and how do we progress students? How do we help students demonstrate perseverance, resilience? We've got so many words for the same thing. It becomes a really interesting untying of complexity to do this. So we've been doing some inquiry work with them through some websites. So this one on the right with this very benign whale shark is the one that I use with my first year pre-service teachers. In fact, they're about to present in the next couple of weeks, and they've been researching using the inquiry approach around developing critical thinking, questioning skills, and then communication. So this one was for a grade 5 class to work on. So I think that we are in a really interesting space for everybody, but particularly for women. And I think that this is STEM is really important, but I think we need to think about real life contextual problems that we can solve, rather than science, technology, engineering, and maths, which has become such a, well, it is important. It's become so important. And I think we need to step back and look more at skills, at problem solving, and at inquiry, and at the doing aspect of this. Because what became really clear from working with 100 women, and here we all are here, and again, I'm in there, you can find me if you can. What became clear from the conversations I had with these amazing women who were professors and who were engineers and who all worked in STEM was how worried they were about the future for their children, for their grandchildren, and for the world in general. And I think that's why I'm looking at encouraging more women and more men into STEM, into the problem solving, and into creating a better future for the world. And Antarctica is incredibly fragile in terms of being able to, it's not terribly resilient. So I put that in there for that. And there are some, I can give you the whole reference list, and I'm happy to make that available to you. But it was something that, that we felt very strongly about. Yuli.
Yes.
Have I run out of time?
Yeah, it's this. I just make a chat on the chat box, so 3 minutes left. So please, so I saw it's 5 slides left. So please just finish it up before the question and answer.
I kind of am happy to stop here. I'd rather generate some conversation. When I have to tell you that this was the topic that the conveners wanted me to talk about, and I'm happy to, but I never really thought I was a feminist. But I do think that this is an important discussion. And because so many of my students are female in education, therefore we need to encourage them to teach STEM, to be confident to teach it, because we do want that being translated through into our future, because we are going to need lots of these amazing people to solve all these problems.
Yes. So I think it's really interesting idea, isn't it? Because the woman itself, it's influenced by different values, especially in the society. So it will be interesting to engage that kind of issue in Indonesia. So thanks, Rachel. So I would like to share the question. There is several questions. Hopefully we can answer throughout the time. The first question is from Pak Aib Saifullah from UP. How to engage women to participate more in science based on their different conditions. So it's also relevant to the next question, Rachel, is about between balancing career and family, because it's always challenging for women. Should employer in STEM fields in particular is consider providing more flexibility for women employee? So that's the question can be answered by you as well. And the other question,
I think this is probably a question, Yuli, that you would be better placed to answer in Indonesia, having got two beautiful young ladies yourself. It is an incredible challenge. I think that we raise the awareness, but we also do the predominance of the child rearing. And when we do the predominance of the child rearing, then that is always going to be a kind of a segue between the two. We're going to have to manage it. And to be honest, I wish I had a magic answer to this. I'm not sure I do. I think it's about raising awareness. I think if we're having the conversation at these high levels, that's incredibly important start. I think that, I really do think that. So I really wish I had a incredibly, you know, a magic wand to fix this. I do think we have to make it interesting. So one of the things that I think we have to do is we have to look at what engages women and what engages young women into the STEM space. And we have to think about how we can make it interesting. Because if we can make it interesting for students, then they'll want to engage. And if they want to engage, then that is part of them feeling valued in this space. So I think that lots of hands-on activities, I think that was a big hit when we did work with you guys in Indonesia. I know girls are often better working in teams because they have that capacity. They have a lot more words, first of all, to use, but also they tend to work well in teams. So it's about building on their skills and their knowledge and encouraging activities that that are interesting to both genders. but really thinking about it from a woman's perspective. So what is that going to be? How am I going to engage, and what's interesting? So, and I think when we look at men and women, they are different, and I don't think we're going to be able to fix it by treating them the same.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Yuli?
Should I answer the question? So yeah, I think it's quite challenging, especially in Indonesia, because if you see the data that you're presenting today, it's not really a big difference between like the motivation both female and male and their engagement as well. But there is the issue that you mentioned about the values, the picture. If you are a woman and then you are expected to have a main role in the house compared to in the career. So that kind of values it doesn't mean we neglected the role of a woman, but it's just the way we pursue our profile as a woman. So different perspective as well. So Rachel is still several questions, and then there is that a question from Pak Maigala regarding that how the employers, and the next question has been answered actually on your presentation about from Pak Darman regarding what are the driving preventing factors for women to study and work in STEM. So
I think it's about environmental field. So I think if it's, I mean, we have this awful situation in engineering here at Curtin where the numbers of women are decreasing in engineering, and then it feeds off itself. And as we lost more professors in engineering, like Nicoletta, the numbers of women wanting to go into that space is getting smaller and smaller. Women don't feel comfortable, they don't feel valued, and I think, and it's very difficult to know how to get change without doing something like positive, bringing in and interviewing just women. And that breeds resentment, because then the males are like, well, you only got this job because you're a woman. And that's not what we want, because that doesn't actually help at all in encouraging people to work together. It's a really difficult area to be able to manage. So, but I think, as I said, conversation is the first part of this, and I think having this is really important.
Yeah, especially the policy as well. So I have two more questions. So the last two more questions. The first is from Pak Faisal from Universitas Asahan. What learning model is used by STEM in improvement the capacity of girls to be ready to face industrial revolution of 4.0? So special probably the capacity of girls itself to face that challenge.
I think the industrial 4.0, I think, is an interesting space that we're in. We're moving very strongly and very quickly with AI and those sorts of areas. I think women are interested in that aspect of it. I think we're curating a lot of information, and I think girls and boys can have abilities in that space. But I think it comes down to for when we think about learning, we want students to look at things that they feel passionately about, address things, solve problems about things that they feel passionately about. So if you're going to give the children in your class an opportunity to, yes. Sorry, I have a master's student about to present. Sorry, and that was Sue. Yuli, Susan. So we are trying to work out how to do that and make it meaningful for them. So I think that would be my aim. The fact that we are trying to solve the problems, and we care for the environment. I'm not saying boys don't. I think girls just are happier to do that kind of thing. They don't tend to do things for the sake of it. They like something, some other reason to make something better. I have a feeling that's where they are.
Okay, so the last question is from USAID, from Pak Jahlu Cahyanto. Thank you, Pak. The international STEM good practices on promoting STEM, women in STEM should be disseminated disseminated across institution, even across the country. And then what do you think? How can education institutions, so as institution in Southeast Asia or globally, collaborate through their programs?
I think so. And when we were nominated for the UNESCO award, there were some fabulous programs that are in play in all countries to try and encourage. So that's why I started with the numbers of girls in education. So for a long time, and if we go back 40, 50 years, those numbers were very low. So we've made extraordinary progress. Let's not kid ourselves that over the last 50 years, women have come a tremendous journey to be from being considered that they shouldn't have been educated in the first place to not only feeling that they should be educated, but that they are they have the capacity to do all tasks. And we have had our female prime minister in Australia, and we've had a female prime minister elsewhere in the world. So we have made tremendous progress, and I think that we are going to continue to raise voices, which we have. I think we have so many amazing initiatives, which we do, and we have the opportunity to present here and to have this conversation in this incredibly prestigious forum is actually extremely important in itself. And the fact that there are questions about how can we do this from a variety of people means that we know that we've got a little bit more work to do. So I think we celebrate that we are amazing and we've made amazing progress. We say there is still more to do. There are lots of programs, and we have to celebrate all children's learning to be better in STEM or to improve in STEM. And I think if I could change one thing in the whole of all I teach, I would really want to encourage assessment to change, to be less rigid, so that we can be more engaging, more innovative in how we teach. But where we are very rigid in our assessments, that then continues to push back against some of these amazing opportunities that we can encourage girls and boys to do. So I think that would be my takeaway. And some of the work that Professor Larry does in early childhood is fabulous. There's less pressure down in that space and we need to be pushing that up rather than pushing assessments down into those primary and early childhood spaces. So I think that is where we have to go into the future. And I'd like to thank you very much, Yuli, for moderating this and for coming on board and being put on the spot when asked questions.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rachel. So everyone, we have been collaborates probably is more than 5 years, and then we have been working with the project. So the question from Usaid it's about the working collaboration and then across the country. Even we wrote the paper together about the STEM in different countries, isn't it, Rachel? Absolutely. So we can see how it's developed throughout the time, especially in the issues of how to engage our females, especially because both of us working as in the teacher educations, and then most of them female as well. So thanks, Rachel, and then I would like to thank you for the great presentation, and then bringing the issue of women is so interesting for us as well, because we usually listen different perspective of STEM in different agenda as well. And then I would like to highlight everyone. I would like to conclude this this meeting, this speech today regarding the several issues of the woman in science. And I think we need to collaborate and working together how to engage the woman, not only in terms of the achievement and also the participation, and also we realize that the profile, the characteristic of woman itself is as a key points to facing the future challenge. And then throughout the works that have been doing by Rachel regarding the developing the skill, the transversal competencies that you have been developed is also relevant to Indonesia context as well. So I think everyone can get benefit throughout your presentation as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you for the participant for the great opportunity for asking to engage with the conversation. I would like to close this speech. Good afternoon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.